I used to live inside a high-end aquarium in Greenwich, Connecticut, surrounded by double-paned glass walls, Italian marble, and a silence so profound I could hear the hum of the central air conditioning as if it were a scream. My husband, Arthur, was a decorative figure in my life, a man in an impeccable suit who appeared only to swap suitcases between one business trip and the next, or to criticize the temperature of the wine before heading out to dinners where I wasn't invited. I was Mrs. Catherine Vance, the young, beautiful, and useless wife, left to wander the hallways with a 6-month-old baby in my arms, feeling the weight of a loneliness that money couldn't furnish. Hiring the new nanny wasn't my idea. It was an order sent via text message while he was in an airport lounge in Chicago. I hired someone. She starts today. Stop calling me saying you're tired. When the doorbell rang on that rainy Tuesday afternoon, I expected nothing more than another employee in a white uniform and downcast eyes, trained to be invisible. But when I opened the massive oak door, the air fled my lungs for a second. Rose didn't wear white. She wore dark denim jeans that hugged thick, firm thighs and a black cotton t-shirt that traced a full, proud bust. She was in her early 40s, with skin that seemed warm even under the cold rain, and blonde hair with highlights pulled back in a loose bun, letting rebellious strands frame a face with strong features. She didn't have the artificial, stretched beauty of my neighbors in the gated community. She had a raw, solid beauty, a physical presence that occupied the entire foyer before she even took her first step. Mrs. Vance? Her voice was husky, deep and velvety, vibrating in the sterile air of my home. That's me. Please come in, I stammered, suddenly feeling small and transparent before this woman who seemed made of earth and fire. As I showed her the house, trying to maintain my posture as the mistress of the manor, I realized I couldn't stop looking at her. I watched the way her back moved under the fabric of her shirt, the firmness of her arms when she picked up my daughter with startling naturalness, and above all, her scent. Rose didn't smell like imported perfume and alcohol like my world did. She smelled like rain, almond soap, and something indecipherable and sweet. A scent of skin that awakened a dormant instinct deep in my brain. At one point in the kitchen, our eyes met and locked. It wasn't the look of servitude I was used to receiving. Rose looked me in the eye, deeply, with an unashamed curiosity that swept across my face, moved down to my neck, and returned to my eyes. I felt a heat rise in my cheeks, a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. She didn't see Dr. Arthur Vance's wife. She saw the lonely, longing, and vibrant woman hidden under the expensive silk. "The doctor isn't home much, is he?" she asked, not as gossip, but as a statement of fact, while her dark eyes analyzed me with an intensity that made me dizzy. "No, he travels a lot," I replied, my voice coming out more breathy than I would have liked. "I see," she said, and one corner of her mouth turned up in a half smile, a gesture that was both compassionate and dangerously charming. "Then it'll be just the two of us taking care of this castle." The phrase hung in the air, heavy with meanings I didn't yet have the courage to decipher. Just the two of us. For the first time in years, the vastness of that house didn't seem like a terrifying desert. It felt like unexplored territory. As I watched her walk down the hallway with that steady, heavy gait, I felt a pang in my chest that had nothing to do with anxiety. Danger had just walked through the front door, and it had brown eyes and large hands. Arthur's absence in the house wasn't a void. It was a negative presence. Even when he was in London or New York, the shadow of his expectations loomed over the designer furniture and over me. I lived in a state of high alert, checking my phone every 10 minutes for dry messages demanding reports on the house, or my appearance for some future event. But as the days with Rose turned into weeks, that shadow began to lose its grip, dissipated by the solid golden light she radiated. Our routine settled into a silent and dangerously domestic rhythm. Rose didn't limit herself to the nursery. She occupied the house. I would hear her humming low in the kitchen, a deep, raspy sound that vibrated through the walls and made me stop whatever I was doing just to listen. She had a way of moving that was the opposite of mine. I floated, trying not to be a nuisance. She stepped firmly, claiming the space, as if the earth beneath her feet owed her support. One Thursday afternoon, the sky darkened and the house grew dim early. I had spent the day orbiting, walking from one room to another, unable to focus on anything. My stomach knotted with a nameless anxiety and the chronic lack of appetite I had developed to fit into the size 0 dresses Arthur bought. I was in the breakfast nook, looking at the rain hitting the glass, hugging my own arms, feeling cold despite the heater. I didn't hear Rose come in. I only noticed her presence when the smell of fresh coffee and warm cake invaded my nostrils, overpowering the sterile scent of glass cleaner. "You haven't eaten a thing today, Catherine." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, spoken in that husky voice that seemed to touch my skin. I turned and found her standing a few paces away. She had the sleeves of her black shirt rolled up to her elbows, revealing strong, lightly tanned forearms. She held a plate with a generous slice of cake and a steaming mug. "I'm not hungry, Rose." "Thank you." I lied, the automatic reflex of refusing care. Rose didn't back down. She took 2 steps forward, invading my personal space in a way that made my heart race. She placed the plate and mug on the glass table with a clinking sound, and crossed her arms over her full chest, staring at me. "The body doesn't lie, girl. Your eyes are sunken and your hands are shaking." She lowered her voice, making it more intimate, almost a secret. "You take care of his schedule, his image, his house. But who takes care of you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I felt a sudden, humiliating urge to cry. No one ever asked me that. To the world, I was the lucky wife of a millionaire. I didn't need care. I was an object of envy. Rose uncrossed her arms and, in a bold move, reached out and touched my wrist. Her skin was warm, rough from work, and incredibly alive against my coldness. The thermal shock was electric. I should have pulled away. I was the mistress. She was the employee. But I stood paralyzed, hypnotized by the heat rising from her touch up my arm. "Sit," she said softly, but with an authority Arthur never had. He commanded. She invited. I sat down. She pulled out the chair beside me, not the one across, staying close enough that I could feel the heat emanating from her body. As I ate, timidly at first, then ravenously, Rose didn't look away. She watched me chew, swallow, and lick a crumb from the corner of my mouth. Her gaze wasn't critical. It was intense, but not for food. It was a look of appreciation, dense and dark, that made me feel seen and at the same time protected. "You look more beautiful when there's color in your face," she murmured, almost to herself. When I finished, she reached out again and, with her thumb, wiped a trace of sugar from the corner of my lip. The touch was slow, deliberate. Her finger brushed my mouth and I parted my lips in an involuntary sigh, staring fixedly at her eyes, wondering what it would feel like to be truly held by her. The moment lasted an eternity of 3 seconds. The sound of the rain outside seemed to have vanished. There was only her thumb on my mouth and her breath, which had grown a bit heavier. She withdrew her hand slowly, but the trail of heat remained burning on my face. "I'll go check on the baby," she said, her voice a tone deeper, standing up with the fluidity of someone who knows they've made an impact. I sat alone in the kitchen, my heart beating erratically against my ribs, realizing with both terror and delight that I wasn't just being cared for. I was being courted, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to let myself be won over. Friday arrived with the promise of one of the most important charity galas of the year. Arthur had sent the dress 3 days earlier, a stunning piece of burgundy silk, with a deep plunge in the back and a side slit that rose elegantly high. It was the kind of garment made to be displayed, not worn. I spent the entire afternoon getting ready, being sculpted by hairstylists and makeup artists who came to the house, transforming me into the perfect luxury doll. At 8 in the evening, I was ready, standing in the middle of the living room, balanced on dizzying stiletto heels, smelling of French perfume and anxiety. The clock struck 8:30, 9 o'clock. The silence of the house began to weigh on me. I picked up my phone and saw the message that had arrived 20 minutes earlier, which I hadn't heard. Something came up with the Japanese investors. Don't wait up. Go to sleep. No sorry, no I love you, not even a call. He simply discarded me as if I were a scheduled appointment in a Google Calendar that could be deleted. Humiliation burned in my chest. Not because I wanted to go to the dinner, but because I felt like a clown, dressed in a gown for no one. I threw the designer handbag onto the sofa in anger and walked to the wet bar, pouring myself a generous double of bourbon. I drank it in one gulp, feeling the liquid burn my throat, and let myself fall into one of the velvet armchairs, stretching out my legs. Tears of rage began to blur my perfect makeup. That's when I heard her footsteps. Rose appeared at the entrance of the room. She had already changed out of her work clothes into simple gray cotton pajamas, and her hair was down, falling in waves over her shoulders. She stopped abruptly upon seeing me there, stranded in my own wasted beauty. Her eyes swept over my body, from the elegance of the dress to my mascara-stained face, and her expression darkened. It wasn't pity, it was a fierce indignation. "He's not coming," I said, laughing without humor, swirling the empty glass in my hand. "Looks like the trophy stays on the shelf tonight." Rose said nothing about Arthur. His name didn't deserve to be in her mouth. She walked toward me with that determination that made my breath hitch. She stopped in front of me, and without asking permission, knelt on the Persian rug, close to my feet. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would tear the silk of the dress. "Those shoes are hurting you," she said, her voice low and husky. Before I could answer, her hands, those large, warm, calloused hands, wrapped around my right ankle. The contrast of her rough skin against my soft skin sent a comforting shock straight to my core. She unbuckled the strap of the heel with agonizing slowness and slid the shoe off, tossing it aside. She did the same with the other foot. The relief was immediate, but what came next made me hold my breath. Rose didn't let go of my feet. She held my left foot firmly and began to massage the sole, pressing her thumb hard into the arch. I let out a low, involuntary sigh, my head falling back against the headrest of the chair. I tried to speak, but my voice failed. She continued, the movements rhythmic and attentive. Her hands moved up, caressing my ankles, and then boldly began to slide up my calves. Her skin warmed mine. I could feel the texture of her fingerprints brushing my sensitive skin, moving slowly, reverently. I opened my eyes and looked down. Rose was looking at me the way a devotee looks at a deity, with a mixture of reverence and absolute adoration. "It's a crime," she whispered, her voice vibrating in the quiet room as she leaned forward. "To dress a woman like you, to make you this beautiful, and not come here to admire every inch of you." The sentence exploded inside me. My breath hitched, an instinctive reaction to being truly seen. Rose moved her hands up to my knees, squeezing gently with a firmness that grounded me, leaving the warmth of her fingers there. She looked up, and our gazes met. Her eyes were dark with emotion. "If you were mine, Catherine," she said my name like a sacred promise, "I wouldn't leave this house even if the world were on fire. I would spend the whole night worshiping the woman he ignores." I was panting, the bourbon and the intensity swirling in my head. I wanted to pull her up. I wanted to be held by her right there in the armchair. But she knew how to play the game. She knew that emotional tension was more powerful than immediate comfort. She squeezed my knees one last time, lingering there, and then stood up slowly, leaving my body cold from the loss of contact. She looked down at me, seeing the state she had left me in, trembling, emotionally raw, and desperate for more connection. "Go to sleep, girl, before I forget who I am and who you are." She turned her back and walked toward the laundry area, leaving me alone in the luxurious room, my heart on fire, and with the absolute certainty that, tonight, I would not be dreaming of my husband. Sunday dawned with a suffocating heat, typical of those days when the air seems to weigh on your shoulders. Arthur had traveled in the early hours for urgent meetings in Miami, and his absence transformed the mansion. Without the need to maintain the rigid posture of a trophy wife, I set aside the linen dresses and wore only a pearl-colored silk slip dress, thin and cool, which slid over my body almost like a second skin. I walked barefoot on the cold marble, feeling like a lazy cat owning its own territory. I found Rose on the back porch near the pool. She was watering the plants, wearing old denim shorts and a white tank top that had seen better days. But on her, it looked like the most captivating outfit in the world. The thin fabric was slightly damp from sweat and water from the hose, clinging to her back and tracing the firm muscles of her shoulders and the curve of her waist. I stood at the glass door for a full minute, just watching the strength with which she held the hose, the way she bit her lower lip while focused on the work. The image of that woman, both raw and careful at the same time, made my heart contract. "It's too hot to work, Rose," I said, my voice coming out softer than usual. She turned, and her gaze fell straight onto my dress, noting the elegance of the silk against my skin. She didn't look away in embarrassment. She sustained the view, running her tongue over her dry lips. "Someone has to take care of the flowers, Mrs. Vance. If it were up to the master, they'd die of thirst." There was a double meaning in that sentence that made the air between us vibrate. Forget the flowers, and forget the misses. It's Sunday, and the house is ours. I went to the wine cellar and returned with a chilled bottle of champagne and 2 flutes. We didn't go to the dining table. We sat on the porch floor, in the shade, with our legs stretched out. Rose hesitated at first, but the heat and my silent invitation won. She sat beside me, close enough that I could smell her. That scent of earth, sun, and warm skin that was making me addicted. We drank the first glass quickly, the cold alcohol contrasting with the heat of the day. We started talking, and for the first time, it wasn't about the baby or the house. We talked about dreams. Rose told me stories from the neighborhood where she lived, and I, who had been trained to be a demure lady, laughed out loud. A loud, real, liberating laugh, throwing my head back, exposing my neck. Rose stopped laughing and just stared at me. Her smile vanished, replaced by that dark intensity I had seen the night before. "You should laugh like that more often," she said, her voice low. "You look beautiful when you lose your composure." The compliment made me bold. I filled the flutes again, and in a calculated move, stretched my legs so that my bare foot touched her thigh, over the denim of her shorts. She stopped drinking, the glass halfway to her mouth, but she didn't pull away. On the contrary, she pressed her leg against my foot, accepting the closeness. "You know what's funny, Rose?" I whispered, swirling the glass in my hand, looking at her from under my lashes. "Everyone thinks I'm fragile, that I break easily." "They're blind," she replied, placing her glass on the floor and turning to face me, leaning her weight on one hand, tilting toward me. "I see the fire you have in there, Catherine. I saw it last night when I held your feet. You're not glass. You're dynamite waiting for someone to light the fuse." The mention of the previous night made the tension explode. The air grew thick with unspoken feelings. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt a pull stronger than gravity. "And are you afraid of fire?" I asked in a threat of a voice, sustaining her gaze. Rose smiled, a charming half-smile. She reached her hand to my bare knee and squeezed gently with her large, warm hand. Her thumb traced a circle on the inside of my knee, a gesture of comfort that felt incredibly intimate. "Girl," she murmured, bringing her face close to mine until I could feel her breath. "I'm a firefighter. I'm a nurse. I'm whatever you need me to be. But fear? I don't have fear. What I have is want. A lot of want." We sat there, suspended in that moment, inches away from a kiss, with her hand warming my knee and the undeniable connection buzzing between us. The house phone rang inside, shrill, breaking the spell. Rose withdrew her hand slowly, dragging her fingers across my skin as if acknowledging the bond, and stood up. "Better answer it. It might be him." Her voice was raspy with emotion. I watched her enter the house with that steady walk, and I stayed there on the porch floor, trembling, with the absolute certainty that that phone could ring all it wanted, but my heart was already busy with someone else. The connection had been made, and now it was only a matter of time before we bridged the gap completely. Tuesday brought a fine, persistent rain that turned the mansion into a gray island. Arthur remained unreachable, and the solitude that once scared me was now my playground. I caught myself wandering through the house with a single goal: to find Rose. I made up ridiculous excuses to be wherever she was. If she was in the kitchen, I was thirsty. If she was in the garden, I needed fresh air. But that afternoon, she was in the laundry room, and I had no excuse to go in there except the hunger I felt for her presence. The laundry room was a narrow corridor at the back of the house, a place where the central air conditioning didn't reach with full force. When I opened the door, I was hit by a wave of hot, humid air, heavy with the intoxicating scent of lavender fabric softener. The rhythmic noise of the washing machine on the final spin cycle filled the room with a low, constant vibration. Rose had her back to me, folding white sheets on the high counter. The heat of the room had forced her to pull her hair into a high, messy bun, leaving her nape exposed, a nape damp with sweat, with tiny droplets glistening on her golden skin. She wore an old gray t-shirt that clung to her back, tracing the deep curve of her waist. I stood in the doorway swallowing hard, feeling a sharp longing just looking at her. I walked in and closed the door behind me. The click of the lock made Rose stop. She turned slowly, and her gaze fell over me like a physical weight. "Mrs. Vance, do you need something?" Her voice was drawn out, slow. "I was looking for an extra towel," I lied blatantly, taking a step into the cramped space. The space between the counter and the machines was tiny. To reach the towel cabinet, I would have to pass her. Rose knew that, and she didn't move a millimeter to let me pass. She stood there, leaning against the counter, challenging me with her eyes. I accepted the challenge. I moved forward slowly, my heart beating in my throat. When I got close, the space was so small that our bodies inevitably touched. I stopped right in front of her, pretending to reach for the cabinet above her head, but my body was pressed against hers. I felt the solid heat emanating from Rose invade my clothes. The contact was electric. I heard Rose's breath hitch and then come out heavy, a sound that made my knees weak. I didn't grab any towel. I lowered my arm and let my hand rest on the counter next to her hip, pinning her there, or perhaps pinning myself to her. We were face to face, inches apart. Her scent there, in that hot cubicle, was overwhelming. The scent of comfort, of hard work, of pure attraction. "There isn't any towel in there, Catherine," she whispered, finally dropping the "Mrs." Her hands, which were holding the counter, let go of the edge and moved up to my waist. The touch of her large hands was grounding. She held my waist, pulling my body against hers. The closeness was intoxicating. I felt her firm stance against mine, and the warmth of her presence sent waves of affection that made me gasp. "You're playing with fire, girl," she murmured, tilting her head to the side, exposing her neck, but keeping her eyes fixed on my mouth. "Maybe I want to get burned," I replied, brushing my nose against her neck. inhaling the salty scent of her skin, seeking the comfort I had been denied for so long. I felt Rose's entire body shudder against mine. The washing machine entered the final spin cycle, and the vibration of the appliance passed through the floor, making our bodies vibrate together in a quiet harmony. Rose let out a low sigh, and one of her hands slid from my waist to my back, holding me firm, pulling me even further up against her, letting me feel exactly how much she wanted to hold me. My heart hammered against her chest. I wanted to climb onto the counter. I wanted to just melt into her embrace right then and there and let her shield me from the world in that suffocating heat. Our mouths were almost touching, breathing the same air. I saw the intent in her eyes, saw the tenderness mixed with longing. But suddenly the machine noise stopped. The sudden silence was like a bucket of cold water. Rose stopped, her mouth millimeters from mine. She closed her eyes for a second, breathing deeply, fighting the instinct, and then released me slowly, but not before running her hand along the side of my arm, a deliberate and slow touch that made me bite my lip to keep from crying out. "The cycle is done," she said, her voice husky, taking a step back and breaking the physical contact, but leaving me there, leaning against the warm machine, trembling, with my body screaming for her proximity. "Better go upstairs, Catherine, before I forget that the door isn't locked." I walked out of the laundry room with wobbly legs and a face on fire, knowing that almost had been more intense than any yes I had ever said to my husband in 5 years of marriage. Wednesday morning brought the hurried movement of leather suitcases in the entrance hall. Arthur announced, while checking his tie knot in the mirror, that he would be flying to Zurich and that the trip would be long, indefinite, to resolve complex issues with trusts and international funds. He gave me a perfunctory kiss on the forehead, not noticing that I barely looked at him, and left. When the driver closed the door of the armored car and the vehicle disappeared through the gate, I didn't feel the usual void. I felt the opposite. I felt that the house finally had oxygen. The first thing I did was take off my shoes. I walked barefoot on the living room marble, feeling the cold texture, and opened all the curtains Arthur liked to keep closed to protect the furniture from the sun. The afternoon light flooded the room, golden and warm. I found Rose on the back porch, playing with my daughter on the activity mat. She didn't see me arrive immediately, and I stopped to watch her. She wore a simple sundress, made of a light floral fabric I had never seen her wear, probably because Arthur demanded discretion. Her hair was down, air drying into soft waves that shimmered in the sun. There was such a quiet beauty in her, a total absence of artifice that fascinated me. Rose didn't need makeup, jewelry, or designer labels to be noticed. She had a natural elegance, a way of gesturing and smiling that exuded a confidence that I, buried under layers of foundation and insecurities, deeply envied and admired. She was a woman comfortable in her own skin, and that was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "The house feels bigger today, doesn't it?" she asked, turning to me with a soft smile, without her previous formality. "It does," I agreed, approaching and sitting on the mat beside them, not caring if I wrinkled my clothes. "It feels like we can breathe." We spent the afternoon there, talking about everything and nothing. Rose had a sharp intelligence and a light, observant sense of humor. She told me stories about her travels and the books she liked to read, and I found myself hypnotized by the way her eyes closed slightly when she laughed, creating little expression lines that spoke of a life lived with zest. As the sun set, we decided to open some wine. I brought the glasses and we sat on the living room sofa, now lit only by the orange glow of twilight. I watched her bring the glass to her mouth, admiring the line of her neck, her glowing skin, the scent of soft body cream she exuded. "Do you know what I think is the most beautiful thing about you, Catherine?" she said suddenly, pulling me out of my trance. "I don't know. My dresses," I joked, trying to hide my shyness. Rose shook her head, placing her glass on the coffee table. She leaned toward me slightly, resting her elbow on her knee and her chin in her hand, studying me with that affectionate and penetrating gaze. No. It's when you forget you have to be perfect. Like right now. You're barefoot, your hair is a mess, no lipstick. You glow when you're just yourself. It's a beauty that comes from inside, you know? From someone who has a soul. The compliment was spoken with such simplicity and sincerity that it completely disarmed me. There was none of the pressure I heard from Arthur, nor the fake flattery of my friends. It was just one woman seeing another for real. I felt my face heat up, but I didn't look away. You make it seem easy, I confessed softly. To be like that. Free. Freedom is an exercise, girl. We practice it every day. She smiled and, in a natural gesture, reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch of her fingers on my cheek was light as a feather, affectionate, yet it carried a subtle electricity that made my heart skip a beat. We stayed in silence for a moment, just looking at each other, enveloped in that atmosphere of quiet intimacy. I looked at her lips, which seemed soft and inviting, and I realized that my admiration for her had already crossed the friendship barrier. I didn't just want to be like her. I wanted to be with her. I wanted to absorb that light, that care, that serene strength. Rose withdrew her hand slowly, but the smile on her lips changed slightly, gaining a more complicit, more intense tone. "Shall we order a pizza?" she suggested, breaking the tension with a delightful normality. "And eat with our hands, no porcelain plates." "Let's," I replied, smiling back, feeling a bubbling happiness in my chest. That night, laughing with her on the living room rug with a slice of pizza in my hand, I understood that luxury wasn't in marble or trips to Zurich. True luxury was that company, that lightness, and the real possibility of being loved exactly as I was. And I was ready to pay any price for that. The rain that started timidly in the afternoon turned into a torrential storm as night fell. A lightning bolt struck near the community, and the power in the mansion flickered until it went out completely, plunging the house into a sudden silence, broken only by the sound of water slamming violently against the glass windows. Instead of panic, I felt a strange calm. We lit thick vanilla candles that decorated the coffee table, creating an island of flickering orange light in the middle of the living room. We were on the sofa, sharing the second bottle of a Cabernet Arthur kept for special occasions, and this, without a doubt, was one. The dim light transformed Rose. Shadows danced over her skin, highlighting the soft curve of her neck and the warm shine of her eyes. She was leaning back on the cushions with a relaxed posture, watching me with that look that seemed to strip me of all my defenses. "You're very quiet, Catherine," she whispered. Her voice, naturally husky, felt like velvet in the dark. "I'm thinking about how much time I wasted trying to be someone I wasn't," I confessed, swirling the glass in my hand, hypnotized by the movement of the dark liquid. "With you, it feels like I actually exist." Rose placed her glass on the table slowly and turned to me on the sofa. She reached out and touched my bare knee, exposed by the dress that had ridden up a bit. The heat from her palm penetrated my skin, sending a wave of comfort straight to my heart. "You always existed," she said, sliding her hand smoothly up my thigh, in a caress that was both comforting and exciting. He just never had the capacity to see the incredible woman he had at home. But I see everything. The intensity of those words and her firm touch moving up my leg made my breath fail. I looked at her mouth, full lips, stained with wine, slightly parted. The attraction I had been damming up for weeks broke through the barrier of prudence. Without thinking, moved by pure instinct, I leaned toward her. Rose didn't pull back. On the contrary, she raised her free hand and cupped the back of my head, her fingers intertwining in my hair, guiding me. When our lips finally met, it wasn't a timid touch. It was a soft collision of souls. Rose's mouth was soft, warm, and tasted of wine and promise. I let out a shaky sigh against her lips, and she took the opening to deepen the kiss, holding me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. The kiss was slow and filled with emotion. Rose had a gentleness that drove me crazy. She explored the connection between us, dictating a rhythm that made my entire body feel light. I dropped my glass on the table, almost knocking everything over, and moved my hands to her shoulders, feeling the solidity of the muscles under the warm skin. Rose. I whispered her name between kisses, feeling the need to be closer than ever before. She let go of my knee and wrapped her strong arm around my waist, pulling me into her embrace. I obeyed, moving closer, feeling safe and cherished. The sensation of being held so completely was overwhelming. Rose pulled back for a second to look at me. Her eyes were dark, shining in the candlelight with pure adoration. She ran her thumb over my lip, admiring me. "You are beautiful, Catherine," she whispered, her voice cracking a bit. "So beautiful it hurts." She went back to kissing me, this time with more emotion. Her hands moved down my back, holding me tight, pressing me against her warmth. I felt the undeniable chemistry of our bodies, the heat rising, the feeling of home settling in my heart. I moved instinctively closer, seeking relief for the lonely years I had spent in this house. There, in the dark of the living room, with the rain falling outside and the scent of candles and wine in the air, I felt intoxicated, not by alcohol, but by the sensation of being loved. I knew that kiss was only the beginning, the key that opened the door to a life where I would finally be happy. The living room, lit only by flickering candles, seemed too small to contain the emotion expanding between us. The kiss, which began slow and tasting of wine, quickly turned into a declaration of need. I was close to Rose, feeling every inch of her warmth, and the connection was undeniable. "Bedroom?" Rose whispered against my forehead, her voice husky and tender. "I don't want to stay here. I want to take you to bed. I want to treat you right." She lifted me in her arms with impressive ease, as if I weighed nothing, and carried me upstairs. I wrapped my arms around her neck and hid my face in her shoulder, inhaling that scent of safety, feeling both protected and excited at the same time. We didn't go to the cold, impersonal master suite. We went to the guest room, a smaller, cozier room where she slept. She laid me on the bed carefully, covering my body with hers. Her weight was the anchor I needed. She kissed me deeply, while her hands began to unveil who I truly was beneath the silk. With fingers trembling with care, she slid the thin straps of my dress off my shoulders. I heard her breath hitch when she looked at me. She didn't just look, she worshipped. She lowered her head and traced the contour of my shoulder with the tip of her nose, brushing the sensitive skin before kissing my collarbone with reverence. I arched my back, a sigh escaping my throat, my fingers getting lost in her blonde hair, pulling her closer. The sensation of her touch, so attentive and loving, was something I had never felt. Arthur was mechanical. Rose was pure devotion. "You're perfect, Catherine," she murmured against my skin, moving her kisses down, making my skin crawl with the joy of being touched. The clothes were discarded, and when her skin touched mine again, it was as if two halves of a whole had finally joined. Rose's hands, large and warm, ran down my sides, holding me as if I were breakable, but knowing I was strong. She leaned down and kissed me, conveying a depth of feeling that left me breathless. "May I?" she asked, looking into my eyes, asking permission to love me, something no man had ever truly done. "Please, Rose," I whispered. She lowered her head and, as she began to map my body with her kisses, the world outside disappeared. It was a journey of discovery. She knew exactly how to make me feel cherished, alternating between soft caresses and firm embraces that made me grab the sheets. I threw my head back, feeling waves of emotion build up inside me. Rose didn't stop. She held me close, keeping me grounded, while she dedicated herself to my pleasure. She whispered sweet nothings against my skin, vibrating with love, and that moved me even more. When she finally brought me to the peak of emotion, filling the void I had felt for so long with her presence, I called her name. Everything faded into a blur of feeling. It was intense, beautiful, and right. "Let go, girl. You're safe," she promised, holding me through it all. And I let go. The release hit me like a storm breaking, violent and liberating. My entire body relaxed, spasms of joy running through me. I trembled in her arms, crying with relief and ecstasy. Rose continued holding me gently as I came down from the heights, kissing my forehead, holding me close until our heartbeats synchronized. She pulled me into her arms, and I nestled there, my head on her chest, finally at peace. I began to say, but words weren't enough. "Shh." She kissed my hair. "We have a whole lifetime to talk. Right now, just feel." And there, in the arms of that incredible woman, I knew I would never accept crumbs from anyone ever again. I had tasted love, and it tasted like Rose. The weeks that followed were, without a doubt, the happiest days of my life. Arthur remained just a silence on the phone, an absence that wasn't missed, while the house, once a mausoleum of marble, pulsed with the life Rose and I injected into it. We stopped hiding. The first great rebellion was taking possession of the master suite. On the first night, I hesitated at the door, feeling Arthur's ghost on the king-sized bed. Rose, sensing my discomfort, entered first. She opened the windows, replaced the gray linen sheets with white scented ones, and lit a soft incense. "This bed isn't his, Catherine. It's yours. And now, it's ours," she said, lying on the side that used to be his forbidden side, reaching out her arm to me. Sleeping with Rose was an addictive comfort. She was a human furnace. I, who always felt cold even in summer, now slept intertwined with her, feeling her soft, warm skin against mine all night. Waking up beside her became my sacred moment. I would open my eyes and see her there, her face relaxed, her blonde hair spread on the pillow, a heavy, possessive arm thrown over my waist, keeping me safe. One Sunday morning, I woke up to soft kisses on my back. Rose was waking me up slowly, her hand moving up my arm, her lips traveling down my spine to the nape of my neck. "Good morning, my girl," she whispered, that husky, sleep-filled voice that gave me chills. We turned to each other in a tangle of legs and sheets. We loved each other right there, with the sunlight coming through the window, with a lazy and deep intimacy. She knew my heart now better than I did. She knew exactly how to make me smile. She knew the rhythm of my soul. Afterward, we showered together in the double shower, soaping each other's backs, laughing like two teenagers in love as the warm water fell over us. The house routine became a perfect dance. We took care of my daughter together, and the girl, who used to be quiet and serious, was now constantly giggling, surrounded by our affection. Seeing Rose with her, the patience, the sweetness, the strength, made my heart ache with so much love. I realized that this was a family, not the butter commercial family Arthur sold to society, but a real family made of care, touch, and presence. One afternoon, while Rose was cooking something fragrant at the kitchen island, and I was sitting at the counter sketching, something I had returned to doing with her encouragement, I stopped and just watched her. She was focused, chopping vegetables, humming low. She looked up, caught me watching, and smiled. That smile that lit up the entire room. "What is it?" she asked. I was thinking, I put down the pencil and rested my chin on my hands. I don't want this to end. Ever. Rose put down the knife, wiped her hands on the kitchen towel, and came to me. She stood between my legs, which were hanging from the bar stool, and cupped my face with both hands. It won't end. And if he comes back? The question, my greatest fear, came out in a whisper. Rose looked at me with a fierce seriousness. If he comes back, he'll find a woman, not a shadow. You've changed, Catherine. You discovered your strength, and I'm here. I'm your foundation. We face whatever we have to face. But I'm not letting you go back into that cage. Never again. She kissed me, a kiss tasting of promise and commitment, sealing our pact. In that moment, I decided. I wouldn't wait for Arthur to leave me or call me. As soon as he appeared, or as soon as I could make contact, I would file for divorce. I would give up the money, the mansion, the status. I just wouldn't give up that woman and the simple happiness of waking up to her scent on my pillow. I was ready to burn the bridges to my old life. Little did I know that fate, or justice, was already lighting the match for me. It was a rainy Tuesday night, much like the one when Rose entered my life months ago. We were in the media room, our legs intertwined under a knitted throw, the baby sleeping in the playpen beside us. The TV was on at low volume, just background noise for our lazy conversation about what color we would paint the guest room, which now, officially, had no use, since Rose slept with me every night. Suddenly, the breaking news sting cut through the programming, shrill and urgent. The sound made the baby stir, and both of us looked at the screen instinctively. The image that appeared made me freeze. It was JFK Airport, surrounded by federal police vehicles with flashing lights reflecting red and blue on the wet asphalt. The reporter, wearing a raincoat, spoke with speed and gravity. Financial consultant Arthur Vance has just been detained in the international departures area, accused of leading a billion-dollar scheme of currency fraud and embezzlement. Operation Sandcastle had been investigating the group for 2 years. Rose squeezed my hand hard. I felt my heart stop for a second and then return to a frantic beat. On the screen, the camera zoomed in on a figure being led by 2 federal agents. It was him, Arthur, but not the impeccable Arthur I knew. He was without a tie, his hair disheveled, his face pale and sweaty, trying to hide the handcuffs with a blazer draped over his wrists. He looked smaller, pathetic. Vance was attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with false documents when he was intercepted. The reporter's voice continued, listing crimes I didn't even know the meaning of: money laundering, conspiracy, tax evasion. I stared at the TV, hypnotized. That man, who for years made me feel small, stupid, and dependent, was now being pushed into a police cruiser like a common criminal. The image of him, always so controlled and arrogant, crumbling live for the whole country to see, had a curious effect on me. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel shame. I felt a massive weight, a weight I had carried on my shoulders for 5 years, simply evaporate. Rose turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence again. She turned to me, her eyes full of concern, cupping my face with both hands. "Catherine, are you okay? Breathe." I looked at her, at the woman who loved me, who took care of me, who made me laugh. And then I started to laugh. Not a hysterical laugh, but a laugh of pure, incredulous relief. "He was arrested, Rose," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "He's not coming back. He's never walking through that door again to tell me I'm fat or that the house is a mess." "He's not," she confirmed, smiling slowly, understanding what that meant. "It's over, my love. The nightmare is over." I hugged Rose tightly, burying my face in her neck, feeling the scent of home and security. I cried a little, tears of accumulated tension being released, but soon pulled away and looked into her eyes with a new determination. Tomorrow this place is going to turn into hell, I said, thinking fast, my mind clear for the first time. There will be press, police, lawyers. They'll come after everything. Let them come, Rose said, with that unshakable calm of someone who has seen a lot in life. We're here. You didn't do anything wrong. You're the mother of this girl and the victim of this scoundrel. We'll face this with our heads held high, and I'll be holding your hand the whole time. If you need to testify, I'm going too. If they try to take anything, I'll help carry it. But we aren't leaving each other's side. That night, we didn't sleep much. We lay in bed, held close, listening to the sound of the rain and distant sirens that seemed to prowl the neighborhood. But unlike the nights I stayed awake waiting for Arthur in fear, this time I was awake making plans. I knew the next day would bring chaos. But I was no longer the scared trophy wife. I had Rose, and looking at the dark ceiling of the room, with her hand resting over my heart, I was certain that no matter what they took from that house, the furniture, the cars, the money, I had already secured the only thing that truly mattered. Rose, I whispered in the dark. Yeah? Thank you for saving me before the police got here. She kissed my shoulder, a warm, possessive touch. I only helped you save yourself, Catherine. The strength was always yours. And with that truth echoing in the room, we fell asleep, ready to face the world the next morning. The next morning was a circus, exactly as we predicted. Journalists crowded the gated entrance, drones buzzed over the garden, and the landline, which never rang, wouldn't stop screaming. But the true confrontation happened in the library at 10 in the morning when Arthur's lawyers arrived. They were 3 men in gray suits, smelling of cigarettes and arrogance, who walked into my house without asking permission, spreading folders and documents across the mahogany table as if they owned the place. I was sitting in the main armchair, dressed not in the vulnerable silk of before, but in tailored pants and an impeccable white shirt. And most importantly, Rose was there. She wasn't serving coffee. She was standing slightly behind my chair, hands clasped behind her back, a silent and imposing bodyguard. Her presence radiated a heat that hit my back and kept me upright. The lead lawyer, Mr. Sterling, didn't even look at me properly. He pushed a stack of papers toward me and held out a gold pen. Mrs. Vance, the situation is critical. Arthur needs immediate liquidity to pay bail and shield assets before the judicial freeze is total. You just need to sign here, here, and here. These are powers of attorney transferring management of the holdings and the British Virgin Islands accounts back to his partners. It's mere bureaucracy. I picked up the pen, but I didn't sign. I started to read. My eyes ran over the lines, and what I saw left me stunned. Properties, accounts, stocks, everything. Absolutely everything was in my name. Wait, I interrupted, my voice sounding firm in the silence of the room. All of this, the mansion, the apartments in Miami, the account in Zurich, it's all in my name? Sterling sighed impatiently, as if explaining something to a slow child. Yes, dear. Arthur put it in your name for tax strategy, for protection. He trusted that since you aren't involved in the business, you'd be a safe harbor. But now we need to move it. Sign, please. Time is of the essence. I looked at those papers. Arthur, in his infinite arrogance, had used me as a straw man. He thought I was so stupid, so passive, that I would never realize I owned an empire. He thought I would sign anything without reading, as I always had. I felt Rose's hand rest gently on my shoulder, a light touch, imperceptible to the lawyers. But for me, it was a reality check. I am no longer that woman, the touch said. You have the power. I dropped the pen on the table. The dry sound of metal hitting wood echoed. No, I said. The lawyer blinked, confused. I beg your pardon? I said no. I'm not signing. I stood up from the chair, feeling giant. If these assets are in my name, legally they are mine. And if Arthur committed crimes to get them, I'm not going to be an accomplice by transferring them now to hide them from the police. I will cooperate with the authorities. I will turn over what is illegal and what is lawful. Well, what is lawful stays with me, as part of my divorce. Sterling turned red. He stood up aggressively. You have no idea what you're doing. Arthur will be furious. He'll destroy you. Rose took a step forward, coming out of my shadow. She didn't shout. She didn't make sudden gestures. She simply looked at the lawyer with that look of someone who has faced worse things than men in suits. Mr. Vance is in a 100-square-foot cell in Guano, Rose said, her voice calm and dangerous. And you are in Mrs. Vance's house. I think you'd better lower your tone, or I'll personally show you the way out. The lawyer looked from me to her, shocked by the audacity. But he saw something in our faces, an unbreakable union, a wall. He realized the doll had broken the display case and now she was cutting. They gathered the papers, grumbling empty threats, and left. When the front door slammed, silence returned to the library. I looked at my hands, which were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had just taken possession of my life. Rose approached and hugged me from behind, wrapping her strong arms around my waist, resting her chin on my shoulder. You were incredible, she whispered in my ear, nibbling the lobe slightly, which made me close my eyes and melt against her body. You sent the sharks running. They thought I was dumb, Rose. He thought I was an object. And now the object owns the vault. She laughed, turning me around to face her. She lifted me and sat me on the mahogany table, pushing the remaining papers to the floor without ceremony. She stood between my legs, hands resting on my thighs, her face lit by a fierce pride and a desire that knew no time or place. Do you know what this means, Catherine? She asked, brushing her lips against mine. That we're rich? I joked, throwing my arms around her neck. That we're free, she corrected, before kissing me with an overwhelming passion. Free to go wherever we want, be whoever we want. And him, let him rot while he watches us spend his money being happy. There, on top of the table where Arthur used to sign his scams, we kissed as if for the first time, laughing and crying, celebrating the greatest of all the frauds he committed, underestimating the strength of a woman who is loved. 1.5 years later, the constant hum of the central air conditioning was replaced by the rhythmic and eternal sound of waves crashing on the sand. We were in Trancoso, in a house of wood and glass open to the forest and the sea, far enough from the São Paulo spotlights, but close enough to the life we chose to live. Arthur had been sentenced to 12 years in prison. The news said he aged 20 years in one. He lost his hair, his arrogance, and his friends. I managed to prove my innocence, and in a litigious divorce settlement where I held all the cards, and the best lawyers paid for with his money, I kept the clean part of the estate. I sold the mansion in Greenwich, that mausoleum of sadness, and invested in something that made sense. A small art gallery in the town square in this house, our sanctuary. I was in the studio, an airy room overlooking the ocean, finishing a canvas. My hands, once clean and nervous, now lived stained with oil paint. I was no longer Arthur Vance's wife. I was Catherine, the artist. I heard my daughter's laughter coming from the garden. She was running through the grass, chasing a ball, and right behind her came Rose. I stopped my brush in midair to watch. Rose looked stunning. The Bahian sun had tanned her skin even more. She wore a loose white linen dress that contrasted with the strength of her body, and she looked younger, lighter, laughing with her mouth wide open as she picked up our girl and spun her in the air. "Mommy Rose," the girl screamed, and my heart warmed. She had 2 mothers and was the most loved child in the world. At night, after putting the little one to sleep, we went to the balcony of our room. The full moon silvered the sea below. I was leaning on the railing, feeling the warm breeze, when Rose appeared with 2 glasses of white wine. She handed me one and positioned herself behind me, pressing her body against my back. Her heat was my home. "Are you thinking about him?" she asked, brushing her nose against my neck, taking in my scent. "No," I replied, resting my head on her shoulder. "I'm thinking that happiness is a silent revenge. He's in a dark cell, and we're here, owners of the world." Rose laughed low, a vibration that ran down my spine. She took the glass from my hand and set it on the side table, then turned me to face her. The moonlight illuminated her eyes, which shone with that desire that never diminished, only matured. "Let's celebrate that revenge," she whispered, and kissed me. It wasn't a soft kiss. It was a kiss of possession, tasting of wine and sea spray. Her hands moved down my back and squeezed my waist hard, lifting me off the floor. I wrapped my legs around her waist, and she carried me into the room, to the huge canopy bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. She laid me on the bed and stayed over me, looking at me with that adoration that made me feel like the most powerful woman on earth. Her linen dress and my silk robe slid to the floor, forgotten. "You're my favorite piece of art, Catherine," she said, running her hand over my naked body, tracing every curve, every new tattoo I had gotten. When she touched me, there was no rush. There was the certainty of someone who knows every shortcut to the other's joy. Her mouth found my skin, and I sighed loudly, without fear of neighbors or thin walls. There, it was just us and the sea. We loved each other with the window open, feeling the night breeze mix with our warmth. It was intense, passionate, and true. I clung to Rose's broad shoulders, feeling the strength of her presence over me and with me, filling every void that had ever existed in my soul. At the peak of our emotion, I looked into her eyes and saw the reflection of my own freedom. I whispered her name into the night, giving myself completely to that woman who had entered my life as an employee and become my queen. Later, lying tangled in the sheets, with our breathing returning to normal, Rose kissed my temple and pulled the sheet up to cover our bodies. "You know something," she murmured, almost asleep. "What?" "That coffee I made on the first day. I put a little extra sugar in it on purpose, to sweeten your life." I smiled, nesting in her chest, listening to the strong and steady beat of her heart. "It worked," I replied, closing my eyes. "It sweetened everything." And there, held by the love of my life, with the sound of the sea singing our victory, I finally fell asleep, knowing that when I woke up, the dream would still be real.